Welcome back to the Senior Hour. I'm Barbara Cochran with my co-host, Dr. Jean Dorio and Randall Kaiden on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with one more person that a lot of seniors these days are talking to me about leaving their estate to, and it's kind of shocking. Their entire life, they have had either a will or a trust where they have left or wanted to leave their assets to their children, and then later on in life, they have a caregiver, and the caregiver eventually gets closer and closer and basically threatens abandonment, and the senior comes to me and says, I need to leave some of my estate to my caregiver, and I ask them why, and they say, well, she's usually it's he and she's going to leave me, and I won't have anyone to care for me. And there are ways to address that as well. So I just wanted people to be aware of that issue. So let's move on to the third question. Another big one I always ask people is I say, at what age should your heirs actually inherit your estate outright, and why? So,
How about when I'm dead?
Well, that's one possibility. But let's say you leave assets to a child, God forbid, who predeceases you, that would go down to their children and their grandchildren, and maybe they're 5 and 7 years old, and they may. Obviously, if they're that young, they're too young to handle the money, right? And so it's an issue to ask yourself. First of all, you don't want to have a guardianship created for younger minor heirs. So minimally, I think you want to say 18. But I have clients come in and they think of different ages. So in other words, you can leave assets in trust for the benefit of children, for their health care, their education, their support and maintenance. It's what we call an ascertainable standard. But in addition to that, a lot of people are interested in asset protection. And so they say, you know what? How long does it make sense to hold on to these assets? It's also what we call parenting from the grave, because we know that people who are 18 years old versus somebody who's 38 years old, for example, they're much more likely to drive down the freeway at 100 miles an hour or just engage in really dangerous behavior that could put all those assets at risk. They might have a suggestion when they're 22 from their friend, I've got this great internet startup. If you just loan me $500,000 to put into that company, you're going to be a billionaire. And of course, the company never does anything, and they lose all their money. So it's protection from themselves, and it's protection from creditors and predators, frankly. And I think we covered this a little bit in the past. The number one creditor is a future ex-spouse. So as a minimum, I usually suggest to people that they do not want to give assets outright to any beneficiary until they're at least 30 years old.
I would definitely agree with that. We mentioned 18. 18, they're still a child.
Still a child.
Let's face it. I mean, they've had really no life experience.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to 30, you have had more dealings socially, interactively with other people, and you've learned a lot more.
Sure.
So I would think minimum 30 years of age.
And I definitely see a trend of people wanting to go even older than that.
I agree.
They might say, you know what, really, they think of themselves usually. They say, when I really got financially responsible was when I was around 40. So let's hold it in trust till they're 40. Or they might be already in a situation with their kids where they say, ooh, that kid has a spending problem, or has a drug habit, or has I don't like their spouse, and there's all sorts of reasons, and so they want to lock it up in the trust. And frankly, I even get people that say, you know what, I never want it to go outright to my kids. I want it to be available to my kids for their entire lifetime, but once they're gone, I want it to go down to my grandchildren. And that's a bit extreme, but some situations actually make sense. If kids have a history of many, many years of having problems with money, it can make sense to hold on to those. And again, it's what we call parenting from the grave. All right, so let's move on to question number 4. Should parents pay one of several different children to help care for them. So I see this coming up a lot with my seniors. What is your opinion? Let's say you've got, Jean, you've got 3 daughters, and let's say one is taking, maybe she's quit her job and she's coming in and she's helping you and your wife all the time, and do you think that that child maybe is entitled to be paid or treated differently than the other children? Or have you ever thought about it?
I never thought about it, because I always thought no matter what, I just don't feel that I would want any of our daughters taking care of me or Robin. That we would just have somebody, that we find come in and help us out. And, one day I think it might happen, but I've mentioned before that, we will have robots. And I'm going to have a robot for Robin and a robot for me, and I'll have my autonomous car, and I'll be able to, that'll lift me out of the robot, they'll get me out of bed, and they'll put me in a wheelchair and roll me into my
Well, what's interesting about that is...
still have a life.
What's interesting about that is...
I disagree. I disagree completely.
Okay, well, let's hear your opinion.
Well, when you're talking about robots and things like this, that to me is, you need someone taking care of you who is human, who has thoughts and feelings, who you can converse with.
That's very interesting what you just said, because
they can steal from you too.
Yeah, that's part of the reason.
A robot won't steal from you. Hey.
Well, it's...
So there's pros and cons to all of this. A lot of people feel like, what, I would rather have my daughter helping me because I feel comfortable with her. Mm-hmm. She knows me. She knows what I need. And this outside person doesn't or may not care as much as a family member. Now, of course, children typically feel a sense of duty and love to do normal things for their parents, but I'm really addressing the question because there's a lot of people out there who are providing a lot of caregiving for their parents. I mean, where they can't even hold a job anymore. And it's an interesting issue because it raises all sorts of issues of trust with the other siblings, I've noticed, because they wonder if that one sibling who has a good heart and is just helping is maybe somehow taking advantage of mom and dad, getting money from mom and dad, changing the will or trust of mom and dad to leave them more, and these kinds of issues. And what I have found is that it's not a bad idea, actually, to go out and see, well, geez, maybe we do want some professional caregivers, and in other cases, maybe we do want a loved one to help at least some of the time, or maybe even a lot of the time. And in those scenarios, what would it cost in the community? It probably cost $25 an hour. So compensating that child $25 an hour and even drawing up a contract for that, I think alleviates tension with the other family members, because they understand that here it is, this one child is really doing way more than the other children. And how do we make that more of a fair situation? Life isn't fair, but at the same time, I think this is going to be a bigger issue in the future. Of course, with 10,000 people a day turning 65, and simply a lot of people just don't even have the resources to maybe pay for the care that they really need. And so, what do you do about this issue? So. And by the way, when they're called personal service contracts, and when you set up these contracts, they can help you to qualify for public benefits like veterans aid and attendance benefits. In other words, the government could be the one paying for that child to provide the help. Okay, and also. Frankly, it can help you even qualify for Medi-Cal in a more circuitous manner. But the point is that there are distinct advantages to thinking this through and saying, you know what, let's figure out a way to compensate a child in some shape or form. Okay, so
well, it's interesting because if you have children who live in the same community that you're in, it's very simple, in my opinion, on a time. As far as time schedule is concerned.
Yeah.
But for our case, our kids live in Palmdale,
Right.
Lancaster, and
Yeah.
and granddaughter who lives in Huntington Beach.
So it's not
that's
even
a little
logistically possible.
No, and
Yeah.
they have their own lives. They're both working.
Right.
So there are a lot of things to think about like that.
A lot of things to think about. You're absolutely right. So let's go to the next question, and this one I think Jean's going to love. Should seniors pay out of pocket to periodically see a geriatric physician? In other words, is the cost worth the peace of mind? Or are geriatric physicians more likely to find and treat life-threatening problems in advance, as opposed to other doctors out there? What's your opinion on that?
I'm a geriatric doctor, but I take Medicare, so
Yeah.
I see patients under the umbrella of Medicare. So,
But let's say
and when I do house calls, so and I go to the hospital, I have a few patients in the office, but I have, and I'm known for giving a lot of time to my patients.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say about a geriatric doctor, wherever they might be, it's going to be the situation that they're under. If they're, in a HMO setting where no matter what doctor they are, specialists or whatever, you're going to get 10 to 15 minutes with that doctor. That's it.
Yeah.
So if you have a geriatric doctor that can spend the time, certainly there's a possibility you might find something that's wrong that could be corrected, but it shouldn't come out of pocket, because if you're older and going to a geriatric doctor, you're on Medicare.
Not always, and sometimes some things are not covered.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is
Geriatrics always is, though, and the only problem would be is within the realm of an HMO setting, you might not be able to see a geriatric doctor per se.
Exactly, and that's a nice segue to explain that my brother actually is a family doctor at Kaiser.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I've had this conversation with him, and I am of the belief that it's beneficial for seniors to see geriatric physicians more so than family doctors. And my brother says, You're absolutely incorrect. Most of my patients are seniors. I deal with all of these issues every single day, and so it's just very interesting to hear other people's opinions on this.
And so when I started in internal medicine and started my practice here almost 30 years ago, I was seeing 18 to 105. Maybe now it's a little older now, but my patients were the full gamut, and at some point I gravitated upward to where I was seeing mostly geriatrics, and then now most of my patients are bedridden. 40% are bedridden.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that, and when you're seeing the full gamut, it's spread out. It's you're supposed to know everything about everything, but when it comes to the problems related to the senior population, it does get a little bit more specific. And whether if you're in an internal medicine practice or a family practice, that specificity that one has is still diluted. And when you're dealing just with older patients or debilitated patients, it does give you enlightenment that I think that a general practice person in family practice or in internal medicine will not have. And I think your brother is correct. For the most part, they get the general things that need to be taken care of. But overall, there are just some aspects of it. And, I have the added advantage that, your brother's in the office. 99% of the doctors are in the office. I'm not. I go out to their home. So
Sure.
I'm seeing a different aspect that allows me to better care for my patients.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Fascinating. Mm-hmm. So what about this one? If seniors notice dementia starting to set in, how could or should they protect themselves from financial elder abuse? What do you guys think?
I think it's incredibly important that the awareness by patients and spouses and loved ones and kids, and the community is more aware of someone slipping into a place where their memories are becoming problems. And I think indeed they have to be surrounded by people that will help to protect them. I think that for the individual, it could be that they are not aware that they're having memory problems, but people have to be aware that seniors who have dementia are probably one of the greatest endangered populations that we have, especially when they're living on their own and they're not aware they're having these problems. And they're especially related to money. They're being taken advantage of in not just here in Santa Clarita, but all over the place. So yes, I think there should be some protection rendered by public health, by the doctors, public health, the family, attorneys, people around them that will assure that they're not taken advantage of.
Do you think there's a way to guarantee it?
Oh, no. That's our problem, because first you have to guarantee that the diagnosis is being made, that one is actually slipping into dementia. Many a times the thought of dementia is coming from a problem that might not be related to dementia at all.
Yeah.
They might be having an infection of some kind. There could be a depression going on.
Right.
That with some simple tools that we have, we can rectify it.
Yeah.
But being astute and then getting the right diagnosis, those people have to be put in an area where safety of financial and medical safety is recognized.
But do you think there's a way, if you're wearing an attorney hat, to make sure that the people are protected? Is the big question, and the question that I get a lot. And I'm here to tell you that actually there is. There are things that you can do. First of all, with your bank accounts or your investments, wherever your assets are located, you could have your loved ones as on the account as signers or powers of attorney, not joint tenants, but powers of attorney, so that maybe they have to be consulted before any large distributions are made, because we do definitely see situations where people will call a senior and they say, oh, I've got, for example, $100,000 annuity for you to buy. And the seniors, and they talk the senior into it, and all of a sudden, they're in totally inappropriate investments, or maybe they've been scammed, and all these problems occur. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to set up an asset protection trust, or to, at least on your living trust, put your child on the trust as a co-trustee with you. This way, when it gets down to it, somebody can be trying to talk to a senior and trying to persuade them to do something that's not in their best interest, but they can't actually accomplish it without the child or the other person signing off on it. So I had a really interesting financial elder abuse case back in the 90s. It was actually one of the first ones out there. And I don't know if I have enough time, but maybe I'll start telling it, and maybe after the break I'll continue it. But in essence, what happened was I had a senior come to me, and he had his whole portfolio in the 90s in internet stocks. And we know in the 90s that things were going crazy with the internet stocks. Things were doubling, tripling, quadrupling. And I looked at his portfolio from 1990 to 1999, and there was literally no change in value. And this was so strange. And I called the financial advisor in to my office, and he came into my office, and I asked him, I said, I'm just trying to understand this. Can you please explain to me, how is it that this hasn't gone up in value? And he said, well, he was making up excuses, and I was pressing him harder and harder, and I started seeing him shake, and then finally he said to me, I'm entitled to be paid just like anybody else. And at that moment, I knew something was really wrong. I just didn't know what was wrong. And so what I did after that is I talked my client into letting me do a 10-year forensic accounting. And on the top of our law firm, I created this huge labyrinthic maze of where dollars went. And what I figured out after literally, it took me a couple months to figure this out, is that the financial advisor perfectly timed things that when things went up in value, he would churn the account so that he could reinvest the money and get another payout on whatever he invested in. And so I put all this evidence together.
Whoa.
And interestingly enough, I knew that this was a crime, but I didn't want to categorize it as a crime because I wanted to get my client funds back, his funds back. And after, I think we have to go to break, but after the break, I'll tell you how I did it. It's very, very interesting.
Okay. I'm Barbara Cochran with my co-hosts, Dr. Jean Dorio and Kendall Hayden on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to the Senior Hour. I'm Barbara Cochran with my co-host, Dr. Jean Dorio and Randall Kaiden on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And Randall, can we continue?
Yeah, let's
the
continue
end
with
of
the
that
story. So as an aside, it's kind of funny because as I was creating this forensic accounting, which I took pictures of it at this point, one of the partners came upstairs at one point.
Your partners?
No, it wasn't my partners. I was a young attorney at that point, and I was an associate. And, really financial elder abuse cases under the Welfare and Institution Code really hadn't been explored too much at that point, okay? They were uncharted territory. And so one of the partners came up to him and saw what I was doing, and he looked at me and he said, "You're just wasting this client's money. What are you doing?" And I said to him, "No, I know there's something wrong here. I just don't know what it is. I got to figure it out. And that's my mission, is to figure it out." And I finally did figure out exactly how he was churning the accounts. And then I started thinking about it. Ooh, should we file a lawsuit against the financial planner? And what I decided to do was I decided to see if he had error and omissions insurance, and sure enough, he did. It's a legal requirement, and I characterized it as negligence instead of criminality with that insurance company. And because of that, the insurance company made my client whole. But unfortunately, I knew in the back of my mind that if this had happened to my client, that this financial advisor was so savvy. By the way, I mean, he would drive around in a limousine. He was very supposedly religious. He would come in and talk about God and all these kinds of things, and everything about him just seemed very wrong. And so anyhow, after I got the payout from the insurance company, fascinatingly enough, was not concerned with the financial advisor's protection, because if their attorneys were very astute, what they should have had us do was sign a non-disclosure form, so we could never disclose anything about what we had discovered, but they didn't make us do it. And so what did I do?
Did they do that intentionally, you think, though?
It's a good question. And so I'll never know. But what I did is I got a hold of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, and I said, you know what? I have spent about 6 months on this case, and this guy committed financial elder abuse under the Financial Institutions Code. Will you take this case as a criminal case? And they said, if you drop off all the paperwork and we don't have to research it and you've got it all there, yes, we will. And sure enough, they prosecuted him. And on his day of sentencing, at that time, John Garamendi came down. He was the insurance commissioner.
Yes.
Because it was the first case of its kind and he was sentenced to 7 years in jail.
Good.
And,
Congratulations.
yeah, that was really
that is
amazing.
tough work, man. I'll tell you.
So we're running out of time here, so I'm going to try to quickly do this last question, but I don't think I have enough time, but I'll try. If seniors can choose, where do you think they should spend their final days?
Oh,
At home.
Home.
At home.
With their robots.
With
No.
Stop
that.
And what about? I'm not talking about, let's say, they're within 6 months of passing away. I'm saying, let's say, the final few years. What about if there's financial issues? What if they've got special needs children? What if they've got dementia, Alzheimer's? Does that change the equation?
Next show.
I guess we'll have to deal with the next show.
That's a great questions, but I'll tell you that opens up a whole different field.
Yeah. Yep.
No, but all this information, all your stories and your strength and helping our seniors, Randall, we're proud that you're here.
Thank you.
Proud that you're doing
you
this
much.
for us.
And it was fun with you being an extra host.
That's right.
Yeah, it was a fun day, fun idea.
We'll see you next month. We appreciate your being here once again. Thanks so much.
And thank you.
We are sponsored by Advanced Audiology and Comfort Keepers in Home Care. Listen to us next week on the Senior Hour. Now go and enhance your quality of life.